welcome. Today I have a double-sided art card. It's 3x4 and I'm going to do both sides. For the first side, I am covering the whole piece with some magazine paper. And I should mention that the card I'm using is one of Tim Holtz file cards. But it's 3x4. You could use any scrapbook paper or cardstock for it, and it would be fine. I'm not going to be inking the surfaces, so I don't need a really nice blending mixed media paper. Once I get it glued down with my Tombow glue stick, I just trim it to size. And normally I would cover that with some collage medium, but I don't plan on adding any liquid medium. It's all going to be strictly collage, so I didn't think it was really necessary. So I added a scrap from a song sheet, and you're seeing my focal image there, and so behind it I'm going to add a couple collage papers. I think that's what he calls them, or paper strips, Tim Holtz paper strips. There's so many different Tim Holtz items, sometimes I get the names confused. So there are paper strips. I'm going to do two different ones to kind of go vertically behind the focal image. And here I'm just making sure my corners are down. A lot of times it just doesn't get to the corners for some reason. My focal image, the floral, is, I'm not sure what that's from. Maybe, I think that's from a sticker book of mine, an old sticker book, but I'm not positive. So there's the second paper strip. Totally different looking, but I thought they went well together. And I also, from that same magazine, I punched a circle of some interesting words, like a headline, or I think it was to sell something. It says Juno pills. I have no idea what those were, but I thought it was looked interesting, and so I punched it out, and then I glued it onto a real lightweight cardstock, and then I just did the edges with some vintage photo to kind of make it stand out. And I'm also adding some vintage photo to my focal image. This might be from Tim Holtz because it does kind of have a shimmer to it. So it might be a Tim Holtz botanical. And the number 6 there that I'm adding is from a digital download, and so I'm adding that in the background before I add the flower. And that number's from a digital download that I printed and cut out. And this is one of Tim Holtz number strips. I sometimes trim it if I don't have enough space for how wide it really is, or tall, I guess. And So I just trimmed it a little bit. So put glue on my floral focal image. And now I can add my circle. I just wanted to make sure where the floral leaves were going to go, so I didn't cover up this circle punch. And now I'm adding my number strip, and I'm covering up the stems so they're not just floating in air. And now I'm just going to add some vintage photo around the edges. And that's the one side. It was pretty simple, but I really like how it turns out. And now for the back side. I kind of looks like I've gone out of sequence here, and kind of so, because I did this, I'm making a pocket for the back side, and I had one already done, and I just didn't like the stencil I'd used. So I put that aside for a different project and am redoing the pocket. So I used the stencil and put down some ink, and I used peeled paint, Oxide, and now I am adding over the exact same spots through the stencil. I'm adding some translucent texture paste. So it's going to only go on the green, and it's going to save the green. It's going to protect the green from any future colors that I add to it. And I'll have to put that aside to let that dry, but I'll continue on with the back side. I always kind of separate it from my paper so it doesn't stick to the paper and tear the paper. And so now it's ready to set aside and dry. Also, when I cut that pocket, I used a punch to get a scoop on the pocket to kind of bring it down some. So now it's dry, and I added some vintage photo behind, and I must have not got that on camera. So I am taking a pocket card, one of the medium-sized pocket cards from Tim Holtz, and that's gonna be on the background. I trimmed the top little curves off. It's like got a curved edge on the corners. So I trimmed off the top one, so it's going to go up just slightly on the card because they're almost exactly the same size as the card. I think they are the same size, but the corners are rounded. So I trimmed off the top, so the bottom one is going up just slightly. And then I went around and I punched little holes into the to both pieces, and I did that by holding the both pieces together with those clips and that little roll tractor thing. I use that as a hole punch sometimes, and I just didn't want to get my sewing machine out. And my sewing machine, I think, is kind of like on the fritz because it just messes up a lot. So I'm just gonna sew it by hand, and I won't make you sit through and watch the whole thing. I'm just gonna do a couple stitches and then come in at the end. I go one way, and then I'd come and reverse it the other way so that every stitch is on both sides, if that makes any sense. Otherwise, I'd have like a stitch, a blank space, a stitch. So I come reverse and do it the other way. So now I'm going to glue my pocket card with a stitched on pocket, and I'm gluing that to the back side of the other card. That's the non-finished side. And I'm going to use my binder clips to hold it down to dry. And I'll let that dry. So it is dry now, and I've stuck on that number 5 from, that's the digital download, and I stuck it on there, and I have this dog. It's from one of the Tim Holtz ephemera packs. I don't remember which one. And I also have this leaf that it was in a sticker book, and I cut it out, and I am not liking how flimsy it is. And so I'm going to remove it from the sticky backing, and I'm going to stick it to a piece of lightweight cardstock, just a scrap I have. And then I'm going to recut it out. And the little roots are going to be hidden, so I don't really worry about fussy cutting the roots out. And that's where it's going to go, with a little puppy dog in front of it. Now, I had thought about just making them removable, but I went ahead and glued them in. I could add something else in there that is removable. There's plenty of room in that pocket. Maybe to like to go in front of the puppy dog. Now, I didn't glue his head off, and I head down, and I kind of bent it out so it looks like it's raised, but it also looks like it's looking at something. So I decided I needed to add something for it to be looking at. And so I have this little label. It was too white, so I added a little bit of vintage photo. I wish I would have done antique linen because the vintage photo is quite dark. And so I used a little water to get some of that off. And I'm going to stamp it with a stamp from the Eccentric stamp collection. And it's just going to have some numbers and order on it. And that's not going to be what he's looking at, but that's going to be my base for what he's looking at. And I had to think about scale. I couldn't have this humongous something there that was way too big. Oh, my head got in the shot there. But I have this little tiny fly. It's in the same sticker book that's lots of little tiny insects. And so I thought, well, that will be perfect. Kind of looks like a huge fly compared to the dog, but scale-wise, that had to work. And often I would try to wrap this around so it's on the reverse side, but it will kind of mess up what's behind it, so I am just going to trim it. I forgot to distress the edges first, and now I'm going to put it on there. And give it a trim. And then I'll go around the entire back side of the card with Vintage Photo. I'm going to leave the little dangles of the threads. I kind of like that. And I'm going to put the piece that I cut off of the, oh, I'm not doing that yet. I'm adding a number strip to the bottom, and again I'm trimming it just a bit. As you can see on the left side of the screen there, I usually pull a bunch of stuff and then just kind of weed it down to what I want. So yes, I'm adding the portion that I cut off of that label, and it's going to go on top of the pocket edge. And because I'm gluing onto texture paste, you have to really make sure. I'm just trimming the strings, but keeping most of them. And I think that's it. I'm gonna do a little flip of them, and then I got some final pictures. I hope you liked it. If you haven't subscribed, please do. If you like what you saw, please give me a thumbs up. And you probably see this project come back again. I'm gonna be compiling a couple of these into something. So I'll see you then.